It had been an hour, an entire hour of your eardrums being engulfed with destruction. The arduous noises were becoming harder to endure, the sounds only seeming to intensify. You lost count of how many punches he propelled at the wall at 48, and the angry, resent-filled screams had been too erratic to even count in the first place. He was having an episode, another episode that you'd unfortunately became too accustomed to. He said it had been your fault. When was it never your fault these days? I'm guessing from the newly formed green bruise on your upper arm that your jittery fingers traced, it wouldn't be the last. When he'd flared up, you'd been in his way. That's why you were the first thing he had struck at. Or at least that's what you had tried to convince yourself. Excuses. When were you going to stop making excuses for him? Ashley. His deep voice ceased, resonating the silence that now lingered. There was no gentleness in his tone, no serenade interest in your well-being. It was harsh, a warning that he was tired of waiting for a response. Your eyelashes fluttered open, your blue orbs dilating at the broken side of glass at your feet. Your lower lip quivered, trying to form some type of word, but all that left your mouth was a soft sigh. The tension emerging from the male's aura in front of you multiplied. He hated it when you didn't answer. It infuriated him. His callous, charred hands settled on your bent knee, his fingers gripping the fabric of your tights durably. "Look at me!" he hissed. Your head snapped upwards, causing a few strands of brown hair to fall into your face. Your gaze lingered on the hand on your knee, examining his scarred knuckles. Blood crusting over the wounds on the skin that had received the most impact when he repeatedly punched the wall. The metallic stench caused your nostrils to flare. You hated the sight of blood. With a sharp intake of breath, you stared up at the male crouched in front of you. You were looking into the face of a killer that had once been pure-hearted, innocent, caring. A killer that had once been your childhood sweetheart. Jeff the killer. "Jeff," you whispered, your soft voice barely audible. "I didn't mean it." "Bullshit!" Jeff roared, slamming a fist into the wooden cabinet beside you, his ominous, lidless orbs, which were ringed and black, narrowed, a menacing gleam reflecting from them. "Bull-fucking-shit," he repeated. He was livid. For a moment you were captured in his intense glare, unaware that the self-inflicted grin on his cheeks was extending. He was grinning. It was the expression he so often had, but this time it was different. He appeared more psychotic than he had in weeks, his head cocked to the side as he leaned in, his singed black hair disguising his face. "You know it's funny," Jeff giggled, his voice emphasizing a malicious tone. "You think you can leave me? You think you could just fucking leave? I think you forgot we love each other, doll. Childhood sweethearts, as my cold, aching fucking heart likes to say." His toned arms extended as he grabbed your upper arms, his blunt nails scraping into your skin. "We always will be. You'll never leave me. You don't have the fucking guts. And if I do," you spat. Jeff's eyes narrowed as he laughed under his breath, shaking his head as if it was the most stupidest question you could ever ask. He'd lost any compassion he'd ever been capable of having. His mind was sentenced to an imprisonment of insanity. He was too far gone. The boy you'd fell in love with was gone. Jeffrey Woods was just another figment of the past. All that remained of him was a cold-hearted, possessive killer. "You don't want to know," he growled as he shoved you backwards into the wall and left. He always left afterwards. It was a mistake you so ultimately tried to avoid making. Jeff was the mistake you never should have made. Flashback, 2 years earlier. It had been days since he'd seen him, days since the incident, days of constantly crossing your fingers for his recovery. You'd thought he was gone, that you'd lost him. It wasn't often people survived from being doused in petrol and set alight. Never mind the depth of what he had been through. You thought secrets were a thing of the past, yet he kept the fact that he was being bullied from you. He had pretended that everything was all right. And yet, it wasn't. You dreaded to think of what condition he was in. More so because you couldn't bear to see him suffer, not because of his appearance. He'd been ignoring your calls, your messages, your visits, and somehow it made you realize something that had changed within him. But you loved him. Nothing would ever change that, and so you had to see him. Your hand rattled against the wooden door impatiently, awaiting an answer. Rain splattered against the concrete pathway, cascading upwards onto your already drenched clothing. It was freezing outside. You grimaced slightly as your fingertips curled into your palm, the numbness sweeping through your limbs becoming unbearable. You knew you should have worn something warmer. Your teeth chattered noisily as droplets of water trickled off your mascara-coated lashes, and the tip of your nose. It was surprising they hadn't turned into icicles yet. "Come on," you muttered aloud, chapping again. For several minutes you stood there, knocking, and yet an answer never came. You groaned in defeat as you turned on your heel, heading back in the direction of the front gate. But as the fluorescent glow of the street lamps illuminated the dark garden, something caught the sight of your eye. Your head glanced in that direction, studying the car that was parked up in the driveway. It was just the parents' car, which meant they had to be in. Annoyance coursed through your veins as you stomped back up to the door. You balanced yourself on your toes, peering into the condensated glass at the window at the top. All that had greeted you, however, was a vacant hallway. It was blatant they didn't want you there. Why else would they be ignoring you? Didn't Jeff want to see you anymore? The thoughts devoured your mind as you remained there, wondering. You reminisced back to when you first met Jeff. 8 months ago. He'd been new to the neighborhood, and your mother had so kindly introduced you both to one another. At first you weren't too fond of him, but as the weeks went on, you found yourself drawn to his eccentricity. He was different, strange, but in a good way. And so a month after meeting, you were dating. Things were perfect, or at least they were, until now. A vibrating sensation buzzed over your thigh, followed by the vexatious ringtone of your cell phone. Within seconds your hand had reached into the pocket and retrieved the small device. Quickly swiping the screen on, the message button alerted you to one unread text. Your eyebrows furrowed in confusion, causing a few creases to wrinkle over your head. Your heart accelerated in glee when the name you'd been so intent on seeing flashed upon the screen. Jeff. Meet me in the back garden under the treehouse. Jeff X. As soon as you finished reading, you reread it, and reread it again. For several seconds you pondered the text, questions bracketing your mind. You made up your mind rather expeditiously. All rational thoughts had vanished. The only thought you were concerned about was seeing the man who'd stolen your heart and all your senses. You took a step forward, traipsing around the side of the house and into the back garden, your vision lingering on the treehouse. A movement caused you to fixate your attention on the bottom of the tree, where a shadowed silhouette slouched against the ladders. The atmosphere alternated drastically around you. The vibes enthralling through your pores exasperating. Something wasn't right. You could sense it. The hairs on the back of your neck stood on edge, as goosebumps erupted on the surface of your skin. The tension was so thick you could have cut it with a knife. "Jeff!" you called out, your voice echoing in the silence. The wind blew around you, picking up the remaining autumn leaves in its trace, and swirling them up into the air. The dark night sky casted a sinister setting on the back garden, and it only daunted you more. The figure appeared to ignore you, besides tilting their head to the side. You bit down on your lower lip, your fingertips nervously twirling and fidgeting with the fabric of your t-shirt. "Why didn't your parents answer the door?" A giggle disseminated the reticence of your surroundings. "They're sleeping." His voice was different. It was deeper, darker. "What about Leo?" "What about him?" he interrogated, heaving himself up from the tree. The light shining on the porch from the kitchen window highlighted a mere percentage of him, though his shoulder-length, textured hair fell into his face, concealing his features. It made you wonder if he could see you, or you were in his peripheral vision at all. The sound of his combat boots stomped into the muddy ground as he approached you. Slowly. His movements were slow, vigorous, deliberate. He was scaring you. He's sleeping too. Jeff. They've been asleep for a while now. I don't think they'll be waking up anytime soon, though, sweet cheeks. Took a step backwards, your chest expanding in an attempt to calm yourself down. What did you do? Another giggle emerged from him. This time it sounded more psychotic, like he was explaining his unknown actions. All I did was tell them to go to sleep. A twig snapped under his feet as he took another menacing step towards you. I killed them. Sweat poured over your face as you gawked at him, shaking your head in denial. Your hand shook and red, the clammy texture becoming noticeable. Surely he was joking? Jeff wasn't like that, though. He wouldn't joke about something like that. You killed them? You whispered, unable to comprehend the question that just escaped your lips. Never in your life did you think you'd be asking something as abhorrent as that. If he was playing a game, though, it was better to go along with it. You didn't know if he'd suffered head injuries during the incident, or whether it messed around with his mind. All you knew was that it must have been a traumatic experience. Guilty as charged, Jeff snickered, stepping into full view of the light. Screaming. It was all you could hear. The sound penetrated your ears as you scrambled backwards into the brick wall. It was only then that you realized the sound was coming from you. You were the one screaming. The sight of his blood-drenched off-white hoodie had repulsed you. And the metallic knife he was gripping tensely in his right hand confirmed your suspicions of his crime. But what really got you, and the reason you were screaming in absolute hysteria, was his face. His once beautiful face had been destroyed. He'd completely lost his mind. Jeffrey Woods had gone insane. The white, bleached textured skin of his face glistened in the light. It hadn't been as bad as he thought it to be, but it was still a shock all the same time. Tears prickled your eyes as he continued promenading towards you, his never-blinking orbs captured in yours. It was only upon closer speculation that you realized the dark circles framing his eyes were disintegrated remains of his lips. He'd burnt them off. You were shaking frenziedly by the time he stood directly before you, his arms trapping you against the wall at either side. He grinned at you with a smile that would haunt you even in your worst of nightmares. Cuts had been carved into his cheeks, from his lips to his ears. They were flesh wounds. You could tell by the blood that still oozed from them. What had he done to himself? Beautiful, aren't I? Jeff smirked, pressing his toned chest against yours. Your stomach was doing somersaults. You felt sick. You wanted to fall to the ground and sob. Those actions were hopeless so as you couldn't even utter a word. You were rooted to the spot with overwhelmness. I thought you said you loved me no matter how I looked. He growled, slamming you backwards. You gasped in pain. You promised you'd spend your life with me. Don't you fucking remember? You said you loved me. Without warning, his lips pressed against yours firmly, but just as quickly he pulled away. Either you stick to that promise or I'll kill you. So make your fucking choice. And the flashback. You made an irrational decision that night. The most preposterous, stupidest thing you ever could have done. You went with him. You willingly committed yourself to a killer. A killer that had most decisively been built for sin.